Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I am doing week 36 of my 2019 reads. This week was a great reading week. I managed to read 2 books from my Latinx and Hispanic Heritage Month TBR for September, which I will link below, and they were so good. The first book that I finished this week was Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This book is something that I have been looking forward to all year. It is sort of basically the most anticipated new release of the second half of the year for me, and given that I don't really anticipate much in terms of new releases, that's saying something. And I was so happy with how this turned out. I think it was absolutely fantastic. I loved reading it, and I think that it is just going to be one of my favorites of the year. There are some really good reviews that have been done. I will link below 2 that I've watched, one by abookolive and one by perpetualpages. They are very good reviews, so I think you can get a lot out of that. I will try to be a little brief in my description of it here, but maybe if I get the chance, I'll do a standalone review for this in a while. I've kind of got a backlog of videos, so we'll see. But if you haven't heard of it, Gods of Jade and Shadow is sort of an interesting Mayan mythology / historical Mexico type of story. So it takes place in the Jazz Age in Mexico and focuses on a girl, Cassiopeia, who is in a bit of a Cinderella type situation where she's poor and she lives with her relatives and they treat her like a servant and she's sort of stepped upon. And in this story, she discovers the bones of the Mayan god of death, and he ends up needing her help to go on a quest around Mexico to pick up some missing pieces of himself so that he can regain his power and take control of Xibalba, the land of the dead. And they go on this quest. It's excellent questing type of story. They go to these different cities in Mexico, and each one of them has an amazing feel to it. You're very immersed in the atmosphere of each of these cities, which is quite unique and distinct from each other, from the city that she starts out in, which is not a city, it's a town, this rural town that she starts in, to, you know, going to the capital, to going to different states where, you know, they're more international. It's a lot of really awesome atmosphere and historical notes that are built into this questing storyline, while also having a ton of Mayan mythology threaded throughout as they interact with different ghosts and spirits and demons and sorcerers and other gods of Xibalba. So the Mayan mythology, I think, is one of the strong points of this story, because Moreno-Garcia does an excellent job of not babying the reader, but expecting that you can pick up a lot from context, while also making sure to explain things that couldn't be picked up from context. So it's a really, really good mix of immersing you in that mythology and explaining the things that you wouldn't be able to figure out otherwise. And I loved it. I love mythology, I love fairy tales, and that really worked for me in this story. The other thing that I think really worked is the themes and the character growth. When I started reading this story, I was like, I'm not so sure about this. Cassiopeia's character starts out kind of whiny. Her family, her relatives are not very nice to her, and she pouts about it, and she doesn't like it, and she wants better. And while I understand that, I wasn't necessarily connecting to her character as much. And then the story just kept taking turns that I wasn't expecting. She went through such character growth, and the story is not about, you know, her throwing off the yoke of an oppressive family. It's so much more than that. There's a lot in this about family, a lot about the complexities of the relationships you have with different family members. A lot of it is about the way that, you know, you view yourself, the way that you mature, the way that you acknowledge your own faults, the forgiving of others of their faults, and just sort of that self-actualization that should happen as you grow up and as you become a better person. So there's some really fascinating themes in this book related to, you know, just being a better person and making good choices in life, and not just taking the easy path, not taking the path that is expected. There's a lot of sort of meta a story in this where, you know, you start reading it and you think that it's going to be the typical Cinderella storyline, and it's very much not. It turns a lot of that on its head, and I think it really gets you to question what stories we want to be in, you know, what kind of path we want to take in life. So that was me trying to be brief about this. I think it's an excellent, excellent book. Definitely going to be one of my favorites of the year. I just was thoroughly into it. I thought so much of it was really well done, and I would highly recommend it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The other book that I finished this week was With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. I had read The Poet X earlier this year, which is the book that she is most famous for, and I'd really loved it. So I was looking forward to picking up With the Fire on High, especially because the themes in it are very interesting. So With the Fire on High is about a teenage mom. So the main character, Imani, is in high school. She is a senior in high school, and when she was a freshman, she got pregnant and decided to keep her baby, even though she lives with her grandmother and she's very poor, and this is kind of a big struggle. And now as a senior, her daughter's a toddler, and she's struggling with the responsibilities of raising her daughter and, you know, doing well enough in school to graduate, while also having dreams of becoming a chef. And a lot of this is focused on some of those identity issues, you know, what it means to be Afro-Latinx, what it means to be poor or from a poor neighborhood, what it means to be a single mom, what it means to be a teenage mom, and what it means to kind of balance all of that with where you want your life to go. And I really liked those aspects of this story. I thought it did an excellent job of exploring those issues and really also talking about a lot of the kind of issues that Imani faces in terms of discrimination, in terms of prejudice, in terms of judgment, especially for being a teenage mom. And I liked that it tackled some of these bigger social issues and made powerful statements about them. I did struggle a little bit with a couple of small aspects of this story. So one of them is that I liked the statements it made. There were a lot of really good political statements, but there was one sort of message buried into the storyline that I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of. So Imani is a teenage mom, and I think that a lot of this story is trying to humanize that, and so you don't just judge and dismiss a teenage mom, you know, saying, oh, you know, young teenage girls who get pregnant, they're just promiscuous and stupid and worthless. You know, that's the story, right? And so this book is trying to say, hey, no, you know, teenage moms are people who have dreams, who have ambitions, who work hard, who care about their families. But one of the things that it does is that it also sort of builds this storyline of how Imani was this 14-year-old girl who had sort of a boyfriend for the first time who was a bit of a player, who took advantage of her. She didn't really even like having sex with him, and that's where I had a problem. It sort of makes her the heroine as a teenage mom by saying, oh, but she's different. She's not promiscuous. She didn't actually even like the sex, so therefore, you know, she's not the same. We shouldn't judge her. And that was just sort of, it wasn't explicit, but I felt that message was there, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I feel like you can still have empathy and have a main character who is promiscuous, who has sex, who enjoys it, and they can be valid human beings. So that part got just slightly under my skin, but it was very minor, and it wasn't something that was explicit. It just kind of felt like it was there in the background and got to me slightly. Also, I wasn't like the hugest fan of the love interest in this. He just felt very bland to me, sort of the nice guy who's totally understanding and, you know, wants to be a doctor, and it's kind of like just this almost dream of what a person is rather than who, you know, rather than the complexities of a real person, if that makes sense. So that part I was also not like the hugest on, but I did really like the complexity of many of the side characters. So in this, the father of the baby, as kind of player ex-boyfriend, is in many ways not a good person. You know, he totally cheated on Imani. He totally just, you know, didn't want to have much to do with her. He gets jealous when she gets, you know, a new love interest, all these sorts of things. But he's also portrayed as a very caring father who is always on time to pick up his daughter, who wants more visitation rights, who wants to be actively involved, who cares deeply about his daughter. And I like that complexity. I like that showing of both, you know, very difficult aspects of somebody's personality as well as really positive ones. And many of the side characters are like this, and I liked that complexity. I just wish maybe the main love interest had a little bit more of it. So overall, I actually really enjoyed reading this book. It was thoroughly enjoyable to read, and it had some very good messages. Just those small things kind of detracted for me a little bit. So overall, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, so that wraps up week 36 for me. Hope you guys are having a great reading week. If you've read either of these books, please let me know in the comments down below what you thought. I am reading many other things right now. I'm kind of in the middle of a ton of different books. I've started some of my Space Opera September reads as well as some other of my Latinx reads. Oh, and I forgot to mention the With the Fire on High is something that I wasn't planning to read until later this month because technically the Latinx-a-thon doesn't start until September 15th, but it came through on my library app early and I was gonna have to return it before the 15th, so I just went ahead and read it now and I'm gonna count it anyway. So I hope that you guys are making progress on any goals that you have for this month, and I will talk to you next week.